Live from our newsroom, it's the Hard Times Podcast. With Bill Conway and Matt Sankum.
Scott, welcome to the Hard Times Podcast yet again. How are you?
Thanks for having me, guys.
How's it going?
Good. Always a pleasure to be here. But keeping busy. Working on a new doc.
See, before we get into that,
Yeah.
you've got a cool guy background. See, I don't have a cool guy background. You've got a Marshall amp. You've got, looks like maybe, what are they called? Throbble heads or something? They're like bobbleheads, but for punkers.
Yeah, it's just Photoshop. It's not real.
Oh, no, that's a backdrop. Oh, that's...
I'm kidding.
Looks like you got a poster for salad days there.
Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of my man cave down here.
Nice.
Yeah.
I feel like I never got my cool office, you know?
Don't you have like 2 empty bedrooms in your house? Like
in my estate?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's still time, man.
I gotta see. Look what I have. I love my girlfriend; she's great. But look at this.
Oh.
This is my level of cool. Is a fake plant.
Wait, that's not even a real plant?
Not even a real plant.
Fake?
I also have like a calming waterfall. It's very beautiful. It's very clean, very relaxing. But it's no culture. So, as a man of culture, Scott, tell me what you're up to.
There's still time to have that man cave. It's not too late.
Maybe. I don't know, unless the goddamn Biden administration outlaws it. Am I right? Commie bastards.
Hey. Which brings us to our first major question. When you were part of the Capitol storming, what exit or entrance did you go into? Was it the east or the west side of the building?
I'm not good with directions. I just went straight up the stairs. I don't know what I just went straight.
Do you think anyone made a documentary about that day? Do you think there were people filming and stuff?
I wish I was. I did think about going down there and shooting some of it. I know a number of my friends were there, but I don't think of any kind of documentary kind of thing, but just phones.
Just passionate about overthrowing the government.
Yeah. That was bizarre. I mean, I wish I regret not being there, but on the other hand, it's like maybe 25 minutes from here. But yeah, I just didn't.
I feel like journalists and documentary people share that sort of storm chaser mentality where something's happening and we're like, yeah, why am I not there? Why am I not interviewing these people and getting the scoop?
Yeah, I think there's something to that. Yeah, but then it's just getting off your sofa, and I have a really comfortable sofa. And it was just going to work. So just couldn't find myself down there. But
you should have taken Joey Shithead to the protest and just thrown him in there and then asked him some questions.
Yeah, that would have been great. Actually, have the whole storming as the backdrop, and he could just be standing there like vision of calm behind.
You would ask him unrelated questions. So how'd you start the band?
Totally unrelated to anything that was going on. Fortunately, Joey couldn't make it. He was in a council meeting that day. But
okay, so tell me about your new documentary. Tell me how you got interested in it and how you got started.
Yeah, so I've been wanting to do something. I've done 2 docs. I've done Salad Days, which is about the DC punk scene, and then I did Cream, which was about the history of Cream magazine. But I wanted to do something a little different, and I didn't want to just do like a straight ahead music doc with more talking heads and things like that. I wanted to do sort of something a little more verite, like kind of like just in it while it's happening.
Project Veritas.
The first 2 have been just looking back, at something, and there's a challenge with that, just in terms of not just telling the story, but just getting the materials, getting the archival stuff that goes along with telling the story. So I wanted it to be something a little more immediate, a little bit more like you were in the story. So with this documentary, it's a story about Joe Keithley, who's a singer for DOA, great punk band, been around for 40 some years. Really meant a lot to me as growing up, and And so, they've always been a politically active band and very outspoken. And he ran for office in 2018 in his hometown of Burnaby, which is not like a one light town. It's population about 250,000. So it's not a small town. It's right outside of Vancouver. And he ran for a council member seat and won, and no one expected him to win. So in 2018, we were in the middle of a pile of shit that Trump had dumped on us all. And I was really just kind of down, like the rest of us probably were. And that story really sort of was like this great, bright moment. And then when I found out that he's going to run again, possibly for another council member seat, or possibly another seat other than council member, in 2022, I thought, well, this could be a hell of a story. And it's the perfect marriage of sort of politics and punk and kind of how the two work together or can work together.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast. He's a very interesting guy. Obviously, his band, listened to it as a kid, very influential. Most punk kids have. Yeah. But the idea of going from, rebel with a cause, going to burn down the system, to I'm going to be part of the system, advocate for better parks is is an interesting story. Isn't there? You probably know the answer to this question. Isn't there another guy, maybe a New Jersey guy, who was part of the hardcore scene or something like that, who's now in government?
I probably should know that, but I don't. I mean, I know there are a number of people. I mean, over the years, it seemed like a thing to do in the 80s. I mean, Jello Biafra ran for mayor. Jack Grisham ran for governor, from TSOL in California. So I'm sure that there are folks out there. I'm just not aware of them, but I obviously will do a little more research and talk to those folks if I can. That's why Beto O'Rourke is in the trailer, because he was like a punk rock kid and obviously took that sort of ethos into what he did. So
Beto O'Rourke is so hot. Do you guys notice that's what everyone talks about with him?
He's got great teeth. I'll tell you that.
I feel like he's one of those politicians where people get so enamored with him they kind of forget he's a politician. They're just like, I really like the cut of that guy's jib.
He is a very good-looking man, for sure. No, he was a lot of fun to talk to.
I had a question about, in just not this documentary in particular, but maybe just throughout your work as a documentarian. Do you ever get those people that hit you up unsolicited of if you want the real story, you got to talk to me? And how often does that happen? And how do you deal with those people?
Both movies I've done, I've come across those folks. I think it's probably normal when you're telling a story that means something to a lot of people, and they think that they know the true story, or they know how it really went down, and you're not capable of knowing that on your, figuring that out on your own. But you got to talk to me, and I'm good. And when I've taken folks up on that, it hasn't generally gone over that well. So the results have not yielded much. No big dark secrets about anything really. It's so doesn't mean, it's not to say that there won't be at some point, but yeah, it is an awkward kind of a thing where you have to deal with that. But it's happened to me more than once.
I found who I was trying to remember. I seen him on Twitter a couple times. It's Justin Brannon. He's a Democrat, New York City Council member representing Bay Ridge, Brooklyn.
He was in Indecision.
Yeah, former musician in Indecision and Most Precious Blood.
Wow. Justin Brannon, right?
Yeah, every once in a while I see him, like, he'll tweet something like, "That's a good band," and then he'll also be like,
by the way,
"There's too much traffic on the bridge." I don't know. Does Joey Shithead talk at all about how boring some of this stuff is? Like the actual grind of politics, where it's like you get this piece of paper passed and so-and-so's got to do this and so-and-so's got to do that. It's like pretty much the opposite of the fast-paced punk world.
That's a great question. I definitely plan on exploring that. Not that I want to bore the audience, but I think it is kind of important to show just the daily routine and how you know, I can imagine it's got to be really dull at times, you know, and, you know, because you are talking about community issues, some of which are very important, some of which are, you know, the dog got loose last night and, you know, took a shit in my yard and, you know, what are we going to do about it kind of thing. So I want to explore that. I want to see, and, you know, thankfully he's still got DOA. He's still, well, because of the pandemic, he can't tour, but, so he's still got that outlet, because I can imagine, you know, there's only so much of I've shot council meetings before, you know, it's, you know, 4 or 5 hours of just,
you should freak people out. You should make a documentary that's just like C-SPAN. It's just like 14 hours of people pushing paper around.
Absolutely, man. Get the popcorn out.
You cut like a crazy trailer of just like people stage diving, all sort of like insane stuff, and then it's just people stamping papers and being like, "We need 1,400 envelopes assigned to those who have not paid their bills."
Right. No, I love that idea. Yeah, addendum 5-4.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. No, that's a great idea. But yeah.
That's a really bad idea, by the way. You don't need to flatter me just because it's, you know, our podcast.
No, I'm doing it.
He's just like, terrific. Yeah, sounds good.
This film. So you know, we'll explore some of that. Hopefully, not in great detail.
Are you going to put his feet to the fire and ask him about? I read about him quite a bit, and some of his opponents tried to slander him by essentially talking about the people who he knew from the punk scene. And I always thought about this, you know, being a member of the punk scene means you're friends with a lot of people, not of which you agree with everything that they do. And one of the things they talk about with Joey Shithead is his band like played some show or something like that for, they're somehow related to eco-terrorist. But I think some eco-terrorists are like, blew up some stuff, you know? So it's like, oh yeah, my buddy, whatever. Yeah, Beartooth is kind of a nut or whatever. But now he's now he's into politics. I've always wondered if, like, you know, if I ever tried to do something like that or rose to any level of public prominence, you know, the people who I know and I'm friends with, and I still like Beartooth, and I was involved with those bombings. So I always wonder if I would ever be able to raise above it.
Yeah, that's a great question, because we're actually I just talked to Joe about that the other night. I said, "Is that off limits?" And he said, "Absolutely not." So the whole terrorism thing. So,
he's like, "Absolutely not." He opens up a secret door in his house. There's just bombs.
Like Florida stealing TNT. Yeah, he's still the one guy that did it. They actually put out a benefit. I remember when the single came out, and it was the Vancouver 5, I believe. Vancouver 5, yeah. And they blew up a porno store.
Was it they blew up the porno store because it was anti-woman? Is that or
yeah,
or because they couldn't get in and they were super? Was it the first incel bombing or what?
It was. Yeah, I think part of it may have been the selection wasn't that great.
Was Joey Shithead and DOA some of the first incels? Why the hell are they blowing up a porn store?
but Joey wasn't involved in that. But it was a friend of his, and he did do a single for benefit single for it. Really good single. I think it was "Fuck You" was on the one side, and I can't remember the other side, but I should know that by then.
What an interesting thing about the punk scene, where it starts out, you know, women's rights and equality. There was a lot of it was, you know, anti-sex work, anti-porn. You know, we had someone on our podcast, the guy from Self Defense Family, actually tell us that he was kicked off a festival once in, I think, the 90s or mid the 2000s because he had admitted to having a sex worker or something like that. Like I use prostitutes. And he got kicked off of a festival because how could you do that? It's degrading to women. Now, if you were playing a punk festival, and you say, I would never use a sex worker, I would never buy services from a sex worker, that might get you kicked off the punk show.
Well, if you say you stream pornography for free instead of like directly contributing, it's like, oh, well, now you're exploiting the sex work and stealing it. So that's the issue. So
if you're listening to this right now, here's what I'll say: Joey Shithead, fantastic guy. If you're a member of the punk scene, don't hang out with anyone who's going to blow anything up because ultimately the tides will change. So even if I go blow up OnlyFans office because they don't pay sex workers enough or something like that, like I'm mad about the revenue split, I will go down in the punk scene as being on the wrong side because this shit flips back and forth nonstop.
Yeah, it really does. It's a really great point. I mean, and remember, like in the '90s when a lot of women were stripping in the punk scene, but it was sort of a feminist statement. Like, no, they're owning it. Like it was, and I'm not sure where we stand on that these days.
I played a show with a stripper once. It was cool. Yeah. I think the punk scene it's completely pro sex. Well, I'm from the Bay Area and I haven't been to a show in a year because of the pandemic. But based on social media postings and what my friends talk about in the Bay Area, I would say the punk scene is very pro sex work. A lot of members of the punk scene have OnlyFans or do more intense sex work. And I played a show with strippers and I don't really ever hear punks talking about like, hey, don't post your tits online. That's,
as far as, I mean, do you think that started with Suicide Girls?
So recently I had seen a couple of friends share like a tweet on Instagram, in their stories. And the tweet was basically the premise of the song Lori Myers by NoFX, of like, hey, what is really degrading? Working, owning your body or going to a capitalist place and, that and like that song, what came out in 1992, So I feel like that idea has been out for a long time. I just think it is gaining more popularity. But as far as the punk scene specifically embracing that more and more, Suicide Girls definitely seems like a good place to start.
Right? I don't know. That might be the next doc.
I can think of a lot of guys in the punk scene who would simp it up and pay $20 a month for some OnlyFans. I mean, I think the attitudes have changed, but
dramatically. I think you're right.
But it's so interesting that DOA, before the pandemic or whatever, still playing shows, and now he's a politician. Yeah. To survive that entire span and be well liked is a pretty interesting thing to do. So it's like, maybe the tides have changed on this or that, and you probably asked Joey Shithead today, and I bet you his attitude, people change over time, right? But it's interesting to have a character who's so truly like foundational with DOA, right? Like even if I watch some of your documentaries, like you can hear people say, yeah, then we went to go see DOA, and that was like the big moment, and it's interesting to think about a guy who's been so foundational like that, and then becoming a politician. I feel like I could destroy him in a debate. not based on his politics or who, but based on just purely tying him to shitty stuff in the punk scene.
Well, I think you're right. I think Joey, the fact that he's still out there and still, the world doesn't hate him. I mean, think about how many punk rock icons you can think of. I won't name names from that same period that have gone on, and people they've just either torpedoed their careers.
Yeah, the trash bin of history.
Yeah.
I had someone ask me recently, hey, this I won't say the name either. This well-known punk guy or whatever likes my band, maybe wants to take me on tour, but I don't know if I could be associated with this guy. Like his views are just insane. Right. I guess maybe Joey Shithead is like, it goes to show about how current he is, always adapting and changing. I mean, in order to be nimble enough to be a politician now. Interesting.
I think you're totally right. And the other thing, I mean, we talked about things, being tied. His opponents tried to tie these things that he had done in his past. Oh, I mean, that's one thing. But can you imagine in this country, there's no way anyone named Joey Shithead could win. Even in a one-light fucking town, couldn't win office.
It really is an interesting thing. Yeah, vote for Joey Shithead. Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen. So the fact that not only his name, but then some of these, he's fairly radical. Well, starting 40 years ago, I mean, the things that he was singing about, fairly radical stuff. Now, as you mentioned, we've kind of come to, it's just part of the culture.
Well, it's so interesting because he's kind of like the perfect personification of something that I'm always talking about, which is that I feel like when I was really deep in the punk scene, I would hear about ideas, and then I'd hear about them on TV 5 years later, out of the mouth of like whoever the top Democrat was, or whoever the top, left-wing news anchor was. I'd be like, oh yeah, I heard about that idea a long time ago. I guess it's apparently finally bubbled up. And it's so interesting that, 40 years ago, he's like this insane radical, and people are like, how dare you dress like that,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like the same thing you said about the media applies to Hot Topic. I mean, it's same kind of evolution, like where, in the 80s, like I hate fucking sounding like an old man, but if you dress like that, it was like a target on your back, same old story you've heard a million times, where guys would just drive by you and throw beer cans at you and stuff. And now it's like, I don't even know what it takes. I don't even know how you have to look to shock anyone.
Yeah. I don't know if you really, I think you have to get like heavy into body mods or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Level. Yeah. Cause
maybe like, yeah, it's interesting. I feel like if I'm just thinking about this conversation, what's a natural extension of it is the next go round, is Chapo Trap House running for president. It's like it's like podcasters with extreme politics that have now just convinced everyone. Because I actually look at the punk scene sometimes and I'm like, there's not really that many new ideas coming out of the punk scene, right? So you have like these original guys and they've got some new ideas, and then there's adaptations and there's a bunch of different scenes, and you got like Los Crudos and like these different people who are super influential that change some of the political conversations in punk. But if you really look at the core of it, there's like not that much intellectual energy and power being packaged in the punk scene ready to explode out anymore, right? Podcasting space, maybe you still have it. Maybe it's like, these extremely popular Patreon accounts with, we make $300,000 a month of people just dying to support these ideas. Yeah. Maybe that's the next thing where right now everyone goes, yeah, well, come on. We're not actually going to be communist, right? But then 30, 40 years from now, you've got Mr. President Chapo.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is podcasting is the new punk. That's what you're saying.
A little bit. I'm talking about, to play in a punk band like Joey Shithead did and then have culture move so much, partially because of him, very influential guy, culture to move so much that he can hold elected office anywhere, right? To go from subcultural, almost pariah, not quite pariah, but punks were certainly treated a little bit like pariahs, to not only an outstanding member of the community, but a member of the community people are willing to say, you can represent us, that's quite the cultural change.
Yeah, it is. I wonder how many people voted for him that were the guy in the pickup truck that threw a beer can at him in the 80s.
Yeah,
I don't know.
No, that's very, it's a lot of stuff like this where you can see how things have evolved, and this is a perfect sort of case study of that and how far we've come. And I think podcasts are the new zines, by the way. It's probably not a new idea, but
it could be.
I don't know. That's
I also wonder about, when I see Joey Shithead, I think part of the interesting part about you making a documentary about him is that I think that there's so many people involved in the punk scene, involved in the hardcore scene, who often think, can I really break out and do something a little bit different? And or am I kind of stuck to this scene? Because there's a restrictive idea in the punk scene where it's like, that's not punk, or that's not hardcore, or you're forgetting your roots, whatever it is. And I've experienced a couple things where I try to branch out, and maybe I feel a little uncomfortable myself, or I think about, is this too far gone for a punk kid? And I think it's really interesting that you have Joey Shithead kind of paving the way there, being like, really nothing's too far gone. Like, you can get over it. I mean, I don't have anyone who bombed anything. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm fine. I can do whatever I want. Maybe more people in the punk scene should kind of look at that and be like, hey, if I want to go start a business or be some sort of public figure, or, it's interesting too, because he's like a community advocate, but he's not quite a community. Maybe this is the wrong way of putting it, but when I think of punks, I often think of activist, right? And then I think the activists push the politicians. You know what I mean? I would say he's an activist politician. He went from community organizer over to the politician side, but still, that's actually a very big jump. And I think a lot of activists don't want to make that jump or would never make that jump. Interesting guy. I can't wait to see this documentary. Tell me about how far you are. Tell me about what you're working on.
Yeah. So,
before you get, how did you approach him about it? Like starting from did you go to him? Did somebody pitch you the idea and say you're the guy to do it?
No, I actually went to him, and he's one of the few people that I've never interviewed before. So, within that scene, and but have always been a fan. And I just thought the story to me again was so inspiring and asked so many questions that I just thought I'd throw it out there to him and see what he thought. And this was probably right after the election. And so I've been working on it really off and on since then. And he was totally on board. I mean,
but you threw it out to him after Biden's election or Trump's election?
After his election.
Oh, his election. Okay.
Yeah. So after he won. And I just thought as this ultimate sort of David and Goliath thing, and which appealed to me. And yeah, he we kept talking for months and months about, different ways to pursue the story and things like that. And then I asked Paul Rackman, who's going to produce the film. Paul directed American Hardcore.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's going to be the producer on this. And we've really just been working out the details ever since. Roughly a year and a half we've been working on this. So started shooting.
You got the hardcore documentary dream team, Salad Days and American Hardcore.
Oh, thanks.
These are some documentaries that I was watching and being like, why doesn't this type of music exist anymore? I'm going to go make an 80s styled hardcore band and play to 30 people.
I thought I really like Paul, and he's also the man behind, or one of the people behind Slam Dance Film Festival.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to premiere Cream there, but then we decided to go with South by Southwest, so we kind of stayed in touch through that. And I just sort of threw him the pitch, and he came on board. So
do you have a sense of what the story is here? So I know Joey Shithead. Tell me about how far he's gotten. Tell me about, did he win re-election? Did he have to fend off some challengers? You mentioned earlier he might be going for another position. Tell me a little bit about the trajectory.
I'm kind of waiting to see what that is. But he's run before and did not win. That was earlier in the aughts. I want to say mid 2000s. And I believe that was the mayor slot. The mayor of Burnaby is a real character and was a real character. And we're going to explore him too. Very conservative guy that had been in there for 5 terms and did nothing for the homeless population, did nothing, and was very pro development and things like that. So, so Joey's been at it for a while trying to get in there, and he finally he ran also as a Green Party member. So once again, imagine that in America, 3 strikes, you're out. There's no way this guy would ever win in this country. So we're going to take it probably from his win. And then I'm going to just be shadowing him through the next campaign and just kind of over his shoulder, kind of following him as he's knocking on doors and things like that.
It's going to be like punk Veep style.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of how I see it, actually. And then, of course, there'll be a part of the film will be about DOA, because you have to give the proper sort of context for who is this guy and why is he important. So there'll be, that'll be a part of the film. But the larger part will really be the, following Joe around and getting his story out there.
Cool. Yeah, I can't wait. So you started a Kickstarter for people interested? We
did. Yeah, we launched it on, let's see, what's today? Thursday morning. And we're about 86% there to the goal.
Wow. Jeez.
That seems like a pretty successful Kickstarter for just from an outside view, that to get close to the goal that fast.
Is one of the perks that you become the mayor of Burnaby? Be Joey's running mate. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the $10,000 level.
Yeah, I will take on any political opinion you like.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about the way it's gone so far. So, but we still got a ways to go, and of course, want to continue beyond the goal, and because this is indie filmmaking is not cheap, and it's full of surprises, and there's always some. I mean, that's part of the whole process, really, is just dealing with all the things that are thrown in your path to that you weren't expecting. So
yeah, like COVID, maybe.
Like COVID. This movie should have been started a year ago.
Yeah. How is it like? Do you still go try to shadow him, or you're going to wait a bit, or tell me about that?
Yeah, we have people. We have people. We'll have people on the ground in Vancouver that will be, that have already shot him, and we'll continue to do that. And then once things open up a little bit, then I'll be out there and I'll start spending time in Vancouver, probably just staying with him, and with him and his family, and until he can't stand me anymore, and then I'll stay at the Motel 6. But,
is this house are you not allowed to call it like the DOA house? Are we all too old to be like, yeah, I'm going to the DOA house, gonna be staying with Joey Shithead? If you're making a documentary about his political career, is that off limits?
I wonder if there's a front porch, take a picture like Discord style. I don't know. I don't think so. I'll report back. I'll let you know.
That's cool. Are you making this documentary just as an excuse to hang out with him? Because I wouldn't be mad if you were, because it sounds like a pretty fun time.
I mean, I haven't even. The first time I hung out with him was right before the pandemic. He played here in DC with the Dead Kennedys, and they were. Which
one? The Dead Kennedys with Jello, or the Dead Kennedys that post pictures of Mitt Romney on Twitter saying "Thank you, Mitt. God bless you. You're a true American patriot."
That's a whole other story, but that Dead Kennedys, yeah. Which apparently was the tour manager's opinion and not reflect the opinion of.
That's right. I did hear it was the made-up tour manager who had access to the Twitter for no reason, who has now been fired and no longer has access to the Twitter. I had heard that same thing. I always love that. It was an intern and he's gone. It's like, you don't have an intern. What are you talking about? That's a whole nother version of punk evolution. Is the Dead Kennedy just be like, God bless you, Mitt.
That threw me. I didn't know what to make of that. I really did.
I like the idea that their brand had faded so far that they've changed while not changing their brand, to the point where they actually thought it would be reasonable to tweet that people wouldn't be surprised. You know what I mean? Because I feel Bill and I created a brand, right? And people have certain expectations of the brand, but as time goes on, there's ideas that I had 7 years ago that I no longer have, or whatever, right? But I think I understand that I don't go on Hard Times' main account and say, hey guys, for example, one of my opinions, hey guys, I think small-time entrepreneurs shouldn't really have to pay capital gains tax. Should I go and tweet that on Hard Times with a picture of Mitt Romney? God bless you, sir, for standing up for the capital gains tax cuts.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of punk rock dudes out there that are pro-Trump. It's really bizarre.
I at least know how to tarnish my brand. I keep it on the podcast. You know what I mean? Look, there's 4,000, 5,000 people here. It's okay. It's really hard for people to take a podcast clip and make it go viral. You ever notice that? It's like,
you're right. No one does that.
Now, if you do a tweet, it's like it could go around the world and back in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But on a podcast, if you're just like, hey guys, by the way, I love Trump, it's pretty hard for it really to get going.
Is it just too much work? Do people not want to just edit it?
There's too many podcasts. No one gives a shit.
Yeah. Okay.
No one's.
Well, yeah, it's the extra 3 steps of, I have to open up another piece of software. I have to clip this. I have to export it, and then I have to check to make sure the quality's okay.
I really like the idea that these causes that people are getting just absolutely roasted for are so important, but they're not important enough to do the exporting of an audio video thing. It's like, well, come on. Look, it's a heinous
capital gains tax.
It's a heinous opinion, but I mean, come on. I'm not going to whip out QuickTime Player. Give me a break here.
I got to upload to the latest version? I don't think so.
Yeah, on second thought, maybe he had a good point.
It wasn't so bad after all.
Yeah.
But yeah. So shit. So I hung out with him then. He was a lot of fun, and so I'm looking forward to. Got a lot of energy, more so than I do, and he's I think 64 years old. So I'm looking
Stamina. He's got stamina. His opponents don't have stamina, right?
He's got it. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to spending time. And he's such a nice fucking guy. Like, and it's true what they say about Canadians. When I watched their sound check, it was just like between the road manager and the band. If there was a drinking game, about saying sorry, I would have been hammered within like 5 minutes. It was like, oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
We've turned down a couple pitches about Canadian mosh pits and that right, just like
oh yeah,
I didn't even know that was a thing.
A Canadian mosh pit where people just be like sorry.
Yeah.
When you talk to him initially, do you get the idea that he's optimistic about like politics, or is he got like defeatist attitude and wants to make changes because it's like, oh, everything's burning already, or does he have a generally cheery view and wants to push things in the direction that he thinks is best?
Yeah, I think he's actually a very optimistic guy, and I think in his mind it's just you don't stop, you just keep plowing through, and I think he's got a lot of things he wants to accomplish in politics, in other words, and and music, I guess, but I think politics really is his main focus.
What are his main pieces of his platform? Like, what are the things that he really advocates for when he gets in there? I can assume what some of them are, but are some of them like local issues? There's like only Canadian people that understand. They're like, the maple syrup taps have to come out. Are you kidding me?
Well, as a fan of Vermont maple syrup, that Canadian crap can stay up there as far as I'm concerned. All right, not coming across these borders.
Yeah, no, he's fighting the real fight up there over maple syrup. It's a big issue. But no, he's really. I know a couple of his key things are, overdevelopment. Providing homeless shelters. There apparently were none in Burnaby. I think that's now changed. So those are some of his, his big passion.
Did he have to take on any weird local politics that people would be surprised about? Like, did he have to go shake a bunch of hands and be like, I always feel like local politics is like an interesting thing where you just get really into advocating for like the creation of a retaining wall along a lake or something, and you're like the most gung-ho about the retainer wall, and you're like, build the wall, build the wall. But it's just about like 6 restaurant owners that are worried about their property falling into the lake.
Every council, has their individual little like hardcore like projects that they're really passionate about, them, like 2 other people, and that they want to do for their community, and whether it's a retaining wall, or whether they have charging stations, available.
Joey Shithead wants to help me charge my Tesla. I'm in.
That's right. I forgot you're a Tesla owner. No, I don't know anything about it. I just made that up. But I've seen other council things where that's a hot button issue.
It's got to be a little funny. Some of the, maybe I'm going to start trying to. I'm really looking forward to watching this documentary, but I would love to just. There's something funny about a guy like him. There's got to be some things that he has to advocate for that are a little bit funny. You know what I mean?
This movie is going to be. It's going to be funny. It can't help but be funny.
Yeah.
Just because of the circumstance, just because of the situations he's going to get involved with, and so like you said, people coming up to him and wanting him to,
I also
something so silly. I mean, I don't know if that'll happen, but
I also just like think about how people evolve so much over time, right? But then there are these like core fundamental beliefs that sometimes don't change in people. Like Bill and I, both straight edge kids. I could imagine like Joey Shithead. I think he said he's like 64 in a council meeting, and like he's been super reasonable throughout the entire thing, and then it just gets to like some regulation on how big the chicken coop should be or something like that, and all of a sudden like you just can't talk to him. You're like, dude, this guy, he refuses to, like, he's like, they have to be an acre wide or whatever, you know, and the people are like, we can't do that, you know.
Like 10 minutes about how much he hates Ronald Reagan, and you're like, what the hell are you talking about? The guy's been dead for 30 years.
Yeah, there's just like a certain element of like an old punk dude, as presentable as they might have become. You know, there's got to be funny things that are still lurking in his belief system that just like won't compromise on.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that those are there, and I'm gonna, you know, we're gonna see those things firsthand. You know, it's like, imagine Ian MacKaye as a council member. It would, you know, it would be like, he would be so
unbearable.
No, I love him, but he would just be very, you know, this is what I
unbearable.
want.
I'm joking.
This is what I want, and I'm not going to change my mind about it. And you know, that hasn't changed in 40 years with him, and to his credit. So I'm sure there's going to be some of that with Joe.
I just think about the political aspects of compromise, you know, like the art of compromise, and then just putting like Ian MacKaye in there, just like, how about just one drink? You know, just relax a little bit. Just like, you don't understand.
Doesn't work that way.
Yeah. I'm also, you know, it's interesting to think about. I think about Joey Shithead kind of in the same way that I think a little bit about like Jack from Twitter, because Jack from Twitter used to volunteer at 94 Gilman Street, and he was a little punk kid, and you can see these pictures of him with like spiky hair and stuff, and every once in a while it'll just kind of pop up and people will be like, obviously he wasn't as important to the punk scene as Joey Shithead was, but I find it very interesting when people go from, yeah, I was a volunteer at Gilman, and like I was in some meeting where we had to talk about whether or not we were going to ban this guy because he had like some pin that may or may not be like a right-wing pin, all the way to like I'm moderating one of the most important social platforms in the world. I love when you got the punk roots people who go all the way, and then everyone else has to deal with them. It's very funny.
No, it is, and you know, we had something similar here. We had organization, I'm sure you've heard of it, called Positive Force. It was like the equivalent to Gilman. Street. I mean, they didn't have a club necessarily, but they had specific venues that they always had shows at. And I went to a number of those meetings, and they were just like what you described.
I went to a punk tribunal once. Yeah. You know, actually, now that I think about it, maybe punks are perfectly adapted for government process, because punks, when you leave them alone to their own devices, they start creating very bizarre rule systems that are very intricate, and you end up just with like some dude with like a butt flap of like some crust band, like having like a charter, and he's like all members in favor. It does get it gets a little screwy.
Well, yeah, I mean, they self-rule, right? I mean, so they kind of, it's a little bit like, well, no, that's a bad analogy. I was going to say, oh, fuck, what's the name of that story? You're going to have to edit this out. You know, where the kids are on the fucking island and they all go crazy?
Oh,
Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies. It's a little bit like Lord of the Flies. I remember Brian Baker from Minor Threat told me one time that punk rock had a set of rules, right? That you all had.
Three things are so important to the whole world. Yeah.
Right? But then DC had its own set of rules. And so you were like, it was like this subsect of the punk rules you had, you know, and it's true. And that's probably in every city. I don't think that's probably unique to DC, but
I like when they go off the rails and get a little screwy. I was at a meeting one time in Olympia, a punk meeting. It was before a festival, and the organizers were telling people not to dance or mosh because displays of masculine energy were going to be offensive or something. And I went,
that was a big thing here in DC.
I went, wow, that's really weird, because it wasn't like not dancing music. There was hardcore bands were playing, but it's just like, don't mosh.
Wow. So did they have to do this?
I don't know what you were supposed to do. I don't know. Like,
I mean, that's my normal.
I think at the time you're probably supposed to just like post on Tumblr about it. Tumblr was very big. It was just like, I just remember being like, oh, cool, I'm in the wrong meeting. Yeah. I mean, I have nothing to say, I guess. You know, pass. Yeah. Just go on past me.
that was a big deal here. Of course, you know, that started with Fugazi, but yeah, that was like, and I love watching those videos of Fugazi where Ian or Guy. I mean, they're such like I don't know if I've ever seen a band control a crowd the way they did. Like, so there's so many fucking funny videos of when people would get up on stage to stage dive, and Ian would like wrap his arm around them and like plop them down. Like,
I actually feel like there was so. Maybe this is just because I'm just a huge fan of all those bands and that music and him. I feel like there's like a little bit more meaning to that. The meeting I was in,
right.
it was like Fugazi's message has been through a game of telephone to the point where it was almost indecipherable and it was unclear if we were supposed to have a good time. And
yes.
it's like,
I can totally see that.
Why are we punishing ourselves like this? You know, like I understand like controlling a crowd is one thing. You know, it's kind of unfun to be controlled. You kind of like, we want to like let loose, right? Come on, we're like working people. We want to like go have fun on the weekends. But then this meeting I was in Olympia, it was like, dude, should I even be here? Like, should I be at the festival? Like, is it not, the crowd's not like a part of it at all? It was very bizarre. And they also encouraged the bands to give speeches, which was, look, if you've ever been to a punk show, you don't need to encourage punks to ramble in between songs. They'll find an excuse, right?
Yeah.
Well, I do find it weird, like that. So you're the person that's booking this fest in Olympia, and be like, all right, we got Bloodbringer, and they're gonna come out, but nobody can mosh to Bloodbringer, okay? Like, no, that is not allowed. Like, all right, well,
Wait.
like, how many vocalists are there? They have 7 vocalists, and they're all huge, but nobody can mosh to Bloodbringer.
So this is a hardcore show in Olympia. How do you control? I mean, let
me try to remember it was a hardcore show in Olympia, but you know, to be fair, I think that the people organizing it had a very specific idea of what they were doing, and I think my band just happened to be in town, and as a favor, they let our band like play an after party or something because they could kind of tell it wasn't exactly the perfect fit. But we were in Olympia anyways, so we're gonna be playing this after party, so we were like, yeah, we'll go hang out and see what the show's about, but the entire crowd actually had to like sit down and listen to these set of committee meetings type of rules before we could even hear the music.
Yeah, I've done that. Yeah.
It's like
everybody has to come to consensus, and then you can carry on. And
it's like, dude,
it's 4 a.m.
This absolutely sucks. I'm going across the street. I'm getting a drink. I'm watching some sports. I'm out. You know, like I try to be part of the subculture. Too many meetings.
You know, I mean, but when you're younger, that shit's confusing, man. Like, you know, like you're still forming, like you kind of know you have a core of what you believe in or what you want to do or what interests you. But then you have these like I said, these sub cultures within the culture, within the subculture that kind of are trying to define it for you and tell you it's DC, I think specifically was a little confused. Excuse me, a little confusing because I actually really admired what they were doing. When I say they, I mean Fugazi and even earlier when you had bands kind of like taking the scene back and sort of saying, no, like that isn't cool here anymore. Like we don't want. Like I totally understood that and could wrap my head around that. But then it kind of took on a life of its own and kind of like fanned out. And I think that's what you're talking about. It wasn't confusion. It was just sort of like, what exactly, like taking these ideas and then it's like straight edge. It was like taking straight edge and then seeing what happened to that as it like went out into the world. It just became something.
Yeah.
That
you end up by the time it gets to the coast, it's just like this most fucked up version of it. It's like you just have people in Reno just carving X's in people's backs and stuff, and you're like, all right, well, I mean, this really isn't for me, you know. I'm kind of out of here, guys.
When I first had heard of like when I would tell people I was straight edge at like the age of 13, people were like, oh, so no premarital sex? I'm like,
yeah,
what are you talking about?
That's the first thing that drive me crazy. Yeah, and it's like, have you fucking just listen to the. Like, do you really think that's what he's saying? Like, do you really think he's saying, like, no fucking allowed? Like, it's just, that used to drive me crazy. So, yeah, it just became, and then once people started getting the shit kicked out of them for drinking, like, what? And then you would hear, like, oh, yeah, Ian does that. And it's like, no, what the fuck are you talking? No, he doesn't. It never happened. You know, I mean, it might have happened if, like, some guy if he was, like, drunk and he got in Ian's face, Ian might have been like, you know, fuck off or something, but like, you know, no one's beating anyone up for drinking, you know, and then you go, and then by the time it gets to Boston, in like late 80s or something, you got like hockey sticks. People like kicking the shit out of people for,
miniature Red Sox baseball bats just ready to go at all times.
Bizarre. I can't imagine.
It's almost like the collective IQ of the punk scene is just at a point where you can't really. I don't even know if it's worth dropping ideas down because they're going to get twisted.
Well, that's part of it, right? Like twisting them, perverting them, turning them into something different, and then you, at the end of the day, you just kind of see how it all comes together. But I think you're right. I think the core ideas about like punk rock are always going to be there, but they're sort of like certain parts of it are like amorphous, like they sort of take on their own shape depending on the time of day or the year or whatever,
I can't tell you how excited I am to see this thing. Roughly, I don't know how Kickstarter and making a documentary works. When do I get to? If you had to rough shot, when do I get to see this thing?
So we're going to take it. I'm going to work on the DOA part of the film while I'm waiting for the election and that's not until 2022.
Okay.
So that's about roughly a year from, less than a year from now. So, and then of course we have to edit the whole thing and win or lose, we have to edit all of that together. So, and then we want to get it, together in time for Sundance, like the following year. So,
dude, documentary people are so funny. Whenever I ask documentary people these questions, they're like, "Yeah, well, I'm gonna film like, I don't know, like 70,000 hours worth of content, and then I'm gonna trim almost all of it several times, and then
that'll be my 4-hour cut, and then I'll cut that down."
Yeah,
yeah, because you always have a really long cut. But,
it really is a really interesting form of art that you guys engage in. I mean, I love it. I eat these things up. Your documentaries are great too.
Thank you.
I'm excited that you come on this show and hang out with us.
But your biggest fans.
As a journalist who, you write a story, I'm not really quite a full-blown investigative journalist. Some investigative journalists work on stories for a long, long time. But, you dig into something, you figure it out, you talk to some people, and you put out the content, right? Hey, even if it's like a 3,000-word story, you know? I mean, your editor might give you a month, unless it's like, some big investigative piece.
Long-term thing, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like figure it out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's really interesting. I almost want to just like dig into like in that all those hours of footage that you guys cut. I'm sure there's some really, really interesting stuff.
There's so much great stuff. The one thing I learned really early on was to not become attached to. Somebody gave me some really good advice. I forgot who it was, but I've listened to it and think about it a lot, which is don't become married or obsessed over one particular thing because you may end up having to cut it. It may just not fit into your story. And so I work really hard at not doing that. But yeah, I mean, it's intense. It's grueling. It's a lot of fucking work. And, but I love starting with, it's just like everything else I've done, sort of like when I was doing a magazine, it's like you start with nothing except an idea. And then at the end of the month, the magazine comes out and hits the newsstands and people read it. And then you're on to the next issue and start, it's the same thing, except it's like takes me 3 fucking years to do it. But
yeah, I know that's really a pretty incredible feat of dedication. I think I have like a little bit of ADD or something. I think about if I was focused on one story for that long. Do you ever lose sight of the story? Because sometimes if I write a written story and I read it back and too many times and I'm editing it and tweaking, I'm like, what is this even about? I don't care. And you have to throw it off to someone else because you're like, I don't even know if this is like with the hard times, we write jokes and we're like, I don't even know if this is any good anymore. It was funny when I saw it the first time. Now I don't even know what it is. Is this a joke? Why haven't I laughed in 3 years?
I've thought about that a lot with your stories. I always wonder what that process is like. Like, hey, how many people decide?
We have to cut like crazy. There's probably I don't know 500 or 1,000 headlines pitch for every one that runs. Do you think that's right, Bill?
Yeah, it's
if you count the cold pitches,
200 to 1, as far as what we're running right now, the output
from our core contributor group.
So who decides? Like, are you guys like where it's like
you're looking at them?
Okay. So
and our
and
editor
then-
Chrissy.
okay, I'm just curious because
Yeah.
this stuff is brilliant, and I don't know what I've said this to so many friends. Like, I seriously don't know. I'm not just kissing your ass because I'm staring at you, but I don't know what I'd do without the hard times stuff. It just cracks me up. Like,
I'm so glad you like it. Yeah.
now I've been.
It's a big group project, and pretty much what it is is it's just like an intense form of crowdsourcing from people all across the scene, mixed with some curation, mixed with some tweaking and some polishing. So I guess the analogy would kind of be something like, you have like stringers who go out and film like a ton of stuff, and then it comes to you, and then you piece it together, and then that's your touch, where it's like, oh, that's my thing now. From many pieces become one new piece of art. It's a little something like that. So it's really actually pretty interesting because Bill is more deeply embedded in the actual production of the content. I see the content before it goes out, but sometimes people are like, they'll meet me and they'll be like, hey man, I really enjoy that stuff. I'm like, yeah, maybe you should tell Dan Kozu, one of our freelancers who's written 300 pieces, because at this point, some of our freelancers, and I'm sure Bill, have all written more than me. Bill, how many stories do you think you've written?
I counted like 2 years ago, and it was over 300. So I'm probably
you're
500
just
to
over.
600.
Okay, so Bill's probably still top dog.
Wow. Well, it's brilliant stuff. And you guys have really tapped into something. And, and I think you're right. I think when you mentioned curating, I mean, I know that word is so overused, but I'm going to use it again. It's like, it when you see it, or in your case, when you read it, like, yeah, okay, this is hard times. This is going to go. It's the same with, with the film, really. It's the same type of stuff. Like, yeah, okay, this is going to work. The audience, it's going to resonate, or it's not, or, it takes a lot of overthinking. And then there's times where I step away for like a month, and because I'm so burnt out, and I lose sight of, of the story or one particular little thing that I'm obsessing over. I remember with Salad Days, we thought we were done, and I'll be the first to admit that, I think I had just burned myself out, and I just couldn't look at it anymore. And so we showed it to Ian, because we needed Ian's approval, because not approval necessarily, but just wanted him
because you grew up in the punk scene and everyone needs his approval. Deep down, they're all seeking it. So I'm going to start showing him stuff. I'm just going to show him a picture of me. Ian, do you approve?
What do you think of the haircut? Huh?
And he called me up and he said, we need to talk. And I went, oh boy. So the next day.
You gave Ian final say on your edit? That is bold move. That is a bold move.
So he had some amazing ideas, and he made the film way better than it was.
Yeah.
And we sat across the table with him for 6 hours, and he just dissected the film and made some, and there were a couple points where we just like, no, we're not budging. But he really made some great points, and I'm thankful to him for doing that, because he really did. He kind of pushed me, and he I think he actually said, I think you got a little lazy here, and I think it wasn't easy to hear, but I think he was right. So sometimes you just need to.
It's interesting to think about Ian MacKay, but he probably has one of the best content minds in the world of punk and hardcore. If you think about records as a form of content, and you think about controlling a brand and controlling a narrative throughout various releases and stuff, he certainly would be a guy who could help you with anything like that. I actually interviewed him when I was.
Well, the money he left on the table for if he was like a brand, like a brand developer or something like that, like having like him be your guy, like what Pepsi could be right now. Pepsi would be bigger than Coke if they had Ian.
I think Ian MacKay and Mark McCoy are two guys from the hardcore and punk scene who would be like phenomenal as like product managers in like the tech world. But that's a different story.
I used the word monetize one time with Ian, and he goes, "Don't fucking use that word around me." Okay.
Yeah, I mean they have all the chops. They don't have the ideology to. But one time I interviewed him when I was really young, and he was incredibly generous with his time. He talked with me for like 3 hours. No reason to do it. He's answering questions he's answered 100 times, and he's being so polite and generous. And then I think he was like, hey, do you want to like show me the final product? And I was like, sure, here it is. And it was a transcript. That was my style in my zine. It was just a transcript. And he goes, I really think you need to cut this down. You should like create like I think his feedback was something like you should create like an overall theme of all the different things we talk about and just like make it about one thing, like we don't really need to talk about the fact that I went for a walk the other day or whatever, these sort of like, and I think I said, I think it's a small run zine, and I personally read over these things and I'm interested by them. I think people want to hear what you have to say, and it's kind of cool just to print out a conversation. And he's like, I think you really should consider it. And I was like, oh, already printed it.
Screw you, old man. And he hung up the phone.
And that's why he still hasn't been on this podcast.
Yeah, he's one of the most generous people I've ever met.
Yeah.
I can't say enough about him. But
Yeah.
but yeah, he was my first interview. When I was 12, he was my first interview.
Really?
Yeah, it was horrible.
He actually
It was great, but I was horrible.
tell me about why you were interviewing him.
For my zine.
So you and I, he got me into journalism too, because I was going to school and I had like a comedy zine. And I said, Ian, can I interview you? And it's going to be like a comedy interview. It's going to ask you goofy questions. And he said, no, if you want to do an interview, I'll do an interview. But it's, you got to ask me straight up questions. So I said, all right. And that's like my first real journalism interview is Ian MacKaye, punk zine. He forced me to do it. The guy like actually changed my trajectory. And I was like, hey, I like interviewing musicians. Maybe I'll be a music journalist.
He has that effect. One of my favorites is watching him with Nardwar.
Yeah.
Nardwar asks, great questions, but it's so uncomfortable. And just watching Ian at the end of every Nardwar interview where Nardwar does the do,
Mm-hmm.
It's so painful to watch. I literally cut it while I'm watching it, but yeah, it's not really Ian's thing, I don't think. I don't want to speak for him, but
I'm thinking about it like, yeah, I remember that one was pretty painful. I saw a Henry Rollins one that was pretty painful too, where Henry's like, yeah, where he's like, your breath smells like shit.
yeah. It's so painful to watch those. I can't do it. Yeah.
All right, Scott. It was great having you back on. Tell the people what to type in if they want to head over to the Kickstarter and see the different tiers.
Yeah, so go to Kickstarter.com and search up Something Better Change. That's the name of the film, and it'll come right up. And we're offering everything from like signed and autographed. Wow, it's the same thing. Autographed guitars by Joey Keithley model. Skate decks, t-shirts, hoodies, patches, posters, albums, autographed albums by DOA, like Something Better Change the album, War on 45, all kinds of things. And we got a shit ton of stuff. And
enough to draft legislation in Canada and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Co-sponsor a bill.
Yeah, co-sponsor.
It's like, I'd like to introduce this legislation co-sponsored by 630 Kickstarter backers. Yeah.
Oh shit!
All of a sudden, you see like a $400 million thing come in, and like Exxon has all of a sudden gotten in this, and they want you to drill off the coast of Vancouver.
They're right through downtown, just like you cut open the main street and you just drill straight down. Nestle. It's like we need all the water underneath the town. Okay.
Yeah, so there's some great rewards there. Unfortunately, not including the ones you just mentioned. And we're a couple weeks away from the end of it. February 21st is the final day. So any and all amount you can give to the film would be great. It's an all or nothing thing. Kickstarter is. If you don't reach your goal, you don't get to keep.
You have to kill Joey Shithead.
That's right. That's pretty much how it works. Oh, Joey dies if you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you ever listen to DOA, if you think the guy deserves a couple more goes around the sun, chip in. I'm going to chip in right after this interview.
Thanks so much.
It was great hanging out with you. And come back and tell us how it's going sometime. And maybe when it, premieres, maybe COVID will be better and stuff like that. And I'll be able to hang out. So
I'd love that, man. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks,
All right.
Scott.
Talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye, guys.